I think Ethiopia is an incredible example of this at scale. Like, you have a massive tech ecosystem, but it's quiet. It's all Ethiopian founders. It's all Ethiopian investors. And they actually really care about where's this from, who's built this. And there's a sense of like pride in that. I think also Nigeria is a good market for that. Like, all of their founders are local, like most of them are. So I think it's not every place. Some are built like differently, but yeah, I think that there's just quite a few things to think about when we see photos like that.
And I don't want to be This is Selam Hello, where stories of joy and justice vibrate with the rhythm of Africa and the diaspora.
Worried anxious group of people trying to move along. Maybe one day we'll get onto something. Until then we say.
Karibuni! Welcome. You know, the people who come on time on rainy nights, those are the best people, by the way. So congratulate yourselves. Look at your neighbor and say, you're the best. You're my favorite. Let's stay in touch. So thank you for coming, and thank you for being patient as we kind of waited for more friends to join us. Hopefully you got a bit to eat, a bit to drink. Yes, great, fantastic. We try and treat these live events like someone coming to our house, not just a place to go or an event to listen, but really welcoming you into our community. So Karibuni, we're so honored. You could put your time and energy many places tonight. You could be on a date. You could be eating at a restaurant. You guys are not laughing. This is not a laughing crowd, huh? Okay, we try harder. You could be many places, but you chose to be with us. So we are so grateful. As Rahma, my brilliant partner in this endeavor, has said, this is a partnership with the Australian High Commission Kenya. So we are so honored to also have your trust and your partnership. So thank you for investing in us. We are a small local platform building and growing and trying to share stories from Africa and the diaspora, stories of joy and justice. As you saw in that trailer, I would be remiss if I didn't show it. Because how many of you have listened to Selam Hello before? I'm curious. Okay, 7 of you, I thank you. My family thanks you. My M-Pesa number for the rest of you is available later. But so for those of you who have not heard our show or listened to us or been to one of our events, as Rahma said, this is our 18th live event. You can see hopefully through that clip what we believe in. We believe in community, we believe in our own solutions, we believe in this. So Selam Hello is all about giving a space for those transformative stories and people. And tonight is no different. I am just so delighted that I think I'm eligible to be his auntie, maybe, but we'll keep that between us. Caleb Maru is the founder of Tech Safari. How many of you know Tech Safari? Okay, more of you than knew Selam Hello. Okay, fine. I see why you're here. It's okay. My ego is very healthy. I'll handle it. I first met Caleb about 2 years ago, I think, through some mutual friends, including my dear Rahma, who are in the tech space and the founder space, and said, you really should talk to this guy. He's doing really cool things. Tech Safari at the time had a couple 100,000 people on their roster for their events, for their networks, for their weekly, is it weekly, the newsletter, that is really outstanding. So I reached out to Caleb and said, Caleb, this series is like perfect because this guy, Ethiopian as he may look, once he opens his mouth, you will see my nephew-ish friend was born in Australia, and he really embodies what this partnership is about, which is partnership and connection and how we transfer these borders and still create brilliant things that serve communities. So Caleb, I'm proud of you as your auntie/friend, but I think also he has some keen insights to really share with us tonight. So with no further ado, please welcome Caleb Maru, the founder of Tech Safari, to Selam Hello. Welcome. It's always nice when I see people I don't know here because I'm like, oh, there's people who come who are not, again, related to me. I will say before we dive in that I know the rain has delayed some people. I was getting some messages. So as people come in, we'll just make them welcome. Don't give them the side eye. I saw some of you already. Let them just enter. Also, please feel free to continue to have food and drink. We've closed the doors because the rain was a bit loud and we are live recording. So, but feel free and feel welcome. You're at home. Are we together? Okay, fantastic. All right, so Caleb, we've talked a little bit about what Tech Safari does, your journey to this place. I want to just bring us to the present day. 2025 has been a year of political movements. We've seen some changes in the landscape here in Nairobi in terms of funding opportunities. When USAID closed its doors, there was a ripple effect. Started in development, but it quickly is hitting every sector here. So I want to hear from you two things. First of all, you started in the development space, but then you pivoted quickly out of that. So I'm curious to hear kind of what did you see maybe ahead of all of us that we're now feeling in 2025 that you saw earlier? And then I'd love to know, when it comes to building something like Tech Safari, what don't we talk about enough in the continent or on the ground that you, again, were the conversations that you had at the beginning that really led you to where Tech Safari is today? So we'll start with your personal journey, your pivot away from development, and then what really brought Tech Safari to where it is.
Nice. Oh, what a question. We'll start at the start. And I think it's nice because actually the answer to what I found in Tech Safari was part of what led me out of development. But as you can tell, I grew up, I was born and raised in Australia, but originally Ethiopian. Spent a bit of time going back and forth between Ethiopia and Australia. And I think when I was 14 and I spent like an extended period of time in Ethiopia, I just realized this feels a lot more like me and the part of the world that I want to be involved in and I want my story to be about. And that I want to contribute to. I had a lot of family who had lived their whole lives in Ethiopia. And so that felt meaningful, and that kind of set me on this journey of trying to figure out what does that look like. I studied policy and international studies, and I did a bit of, almost finished my law degree, but I got my dream job working in peace and security policy across East Africa. And it was this actually interesting segment of peace and security policy that was about it's called post-conflict reconstruction. How do you patch up a region after there's been a deadly conflict there to prevent it from relapsing? Did that work for about 3 years, loved it at the start. But as each year went on, I started to see more and more of what was happening, which was the work was extremely meaningful and important and should be done. But we were acting in the interest of not really countries across the continent. We were acting in the interest of our funders. I don't know if I'm meant to be saying all this, but yeah, fair. Sorry to my Aussie High Commission guys here. And so that led me down a trail of thinking. And I think the more that we saw, again, some of these regions just really relapse, and talking about political turmoil, look at East Africa, 7 years ago compared to today, it's a very, very different place. I think the outlook felt different. And while there still is a lot of hope, a lot has kind of gone backwards instead of moving forwards. So as I was becoming more and more disillusioned, I was spending a lot of time in Ethiopia, and I was in Addis Ababa, and it kind of hit me this one week. I took in Addis Ababa, as you know, there's a company called Ride. It's like Uber, but for Ethiopia.
And I actually want to say Ride it is Ethiopian.
Yes.
I don't think it's in any other country. It's like a homegrown Uber. It's a whole nother experience, guys. You need to check it out. But
it's so good. It's awesome, and it's contextualized. It works in Ethiopia. Everyone uses it. And I was I was driving with this ride driver. His name was Henok, and he was an engineer, but he made more money on Ride than he did in his engineering gig. And I was like, that's really interesting. What's happening here? That doesn't make sense. That week, I actually met Ride's investors and part of their team at Blue Moon, which is this really beautiful space in Addis, this incubator space. And I saw that the investors actually had gotten returns from that company, or they were about to get returns from that company, and that it was growing at this rapid rate. I was like, what is this? What's happening here? And so here you have this Ethiopian company that's generating outcomes for people. It's owned by Ethiopian founders and Ethiopian investors. I'm like, this is such an incredible story. What's happening here? And I think that started the transition into technology, where I was like, these are interesting stories to tell. There's a lot more potential here. And more importantly, we really have the chance to own our own destiny if we own what technology and what the potential of technology and business looks like in Africa. So I spent a while, 3.5 years, just really trying to understand the tech space. I started a company in that time in the education space. It blew up in Nigeria. We didn't expect that. We took money from Australian venture capitalists. And it just became this, global kind of reskilling platform, teaching people how to get into tech roles. And so that brought me back to the continent. And as I was traveling, I was writing about what I was seeing. And what I found was, oh wow, in Kenya, you guys just like take bodas everywhere. Well, not everyone. I don't know if you.
Has anyone who's never taken a boda? Raise your hand if you've never taken. It's just me? Okay, me and Chris. Guys, me and the Mazungos are the only ones. Okay, okay. Thank you, Dada. Thank you. I was feeling alone in that. Me, I'm afraid. You guys are just out there playing with your lives, huh? Okay.
You have to do it one time, at least one time.
I'm turning 50 next year, and I've actually said before 50, I'm taking a boda. If you have recommendations of who I should take, kindly see me after the show. Back to you.
I'll try to find you someone. And so I took a video of me on a boda, and I put it on like LinkedIn. It did really well. People were like, wow, that's crazy. I didn't realize that. Like a few weeks later, I was in Nigeria, and I was writing about how my friends like have to pay for a full year of rent up front because the housing system's just so different. And what I was noticing here, what I was doing was actually just sharing what I thought was interesting, but what was a very different context for each country and each region. And that was kind of the insight. It was like, there's a lot of different nuance from country to country to country. And there's a massive opportunity to actually explain the context, explain what's happening in these countries from like first principles. If anyone's read Tech Safari, it's super simple. Anyone can read it. And so the insight was, yeah, why don't we tell these stories in a way that everyone can get it and everyone can be involved in this tech story?
In fact, I loved your story this week, which was, why can't AI see my curls? How many of you read that or saw that? I thought that was such a powerful way to synthesize all that we're seeing in AI and how powerful it is, and yet the massive gaps that remain because Africa is not as present at the development stage of these systems. So it's such a great observation of, this is so basic, like, right? Like, I want these things to pop on my AI-generated images, and yet they're not. So thank you. The work that you're doing is so important. You write a lot about, one of the things I appreciate is that your stories are very positive. You wrestle with the political, and we're going to talk about that later. And as we all know, if anyone's in any kind of creative or tech space, you know the investment models cause some questions. But you're really overwhelmingly positive because you're shining a light on things that you're observing that are working or asking questions. So I want to know from your view, what are the sectors or technologies where Africa is not just catching up, but is leading, where we're actually at the forefront? Because I'm tired of hearing we're behind. Anyone else? Yes, I want to know, where are we leading? What are we doing well?
Unreal. Two things come to mind, but I bet you there's many, many more. The first is fintech, and we are in like the cradle of like fintech, where mobile money started and blew up. Seeing what M-Pesa has done and how it has an impact in everyone's life here. Did everyone use M-Pesa today? Hands up if you did.
17 times.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, many times. It's just incredible to see that technology starting in 2007, solving a problem, is so widespread here. And I think whenever people come here in the tech space, they're blown away by it all the time. So fintech for sure, and the accessibility and the outcomes of that is just incredible. The other one is actually our creative industry. I like fundamentally believe the world is becoming more and more African, not just because of the fact that we have a bigger growing population, but just because the way that we create culture, the way that we create music, the way that we create art is now online and global, and it's frankly just very interesting and like on point. I mean, Afrobeat is just one of the best genres of all time. Like, it's like such an incredible genre, and so like seeing that go mainstream. Actually bringing this back to Australia a little bit, when I grew up in a town called Alice Springs, which is in Central Australia, and I was the only African kid at my school, or like in my grade, and so that was a bit weird. Now my siblings who go to school are like the coolest kids in their classroom. Everyone asks my sister, "Hey, can we come over and eat some injera?" So. If anything tells you the world is becoming more African, it's that. It's like we're more globalized, and it's actually cool to be from these different places, and cool to be from the continent. So I think those are two things I see a lot of.
We'll take it for sure. So you brought up Australia, so let's talk about that a little bit. At the beginning, we kind of touched on the fact that development has these models that often, as much as it might be powerful to have an investment of X amount of USD or shillings, you sometimes are beholden to the agenda of whomever it is that's investing in you. So given that model is one we don't want to rely on, how do you see meaningful partnerships happening? When we think about even Australia and Kenya, two landscapes you know well, how can it be more than just a headline? We're sponsored by XYZ, but rather a meaningful engine particularly for growth in the tech industry.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, that's a really good question. I think if we want to build meaningful collaborations, it takes a few layers, and I think the first one is really just understanding each other's respective markets. So, what can we learn about the Australian market, or like about what's valuable in Australia, and then similarly, what can Australia learn about Kenya's markets, and then try to see where there can be value exchange. I actually think a lot about what comes to mind is an unlikely collaboration with another country called Estonia. It's this tiny country in in the north of Europe, north of Europe, and they're really looking at how do we invest into a relationship with the African continent, specifically Kenya. One of their first starting points was actually putting on a really large conference that is usually in Estonia and bringing it here and seeing how they could engage the tech ecosystem. And like going further down that roadmap, it now looks like Estonian government working with Kenyan government or African governments like look at infrastructure in ICT. So I think it's really spending the time to build that relationship and seeing what is transferable and what is similar and where can you invest.
Interesting. I see some of you Googling Estonia right now. Well done, well done. Maybe you should look where whoever's next to Estonia, that might be our next target. You know, you've written around in Tech Safari about the future of global innovation being African. And we've called today's event Now and Next, because I believe Africa is both now and we're next. And we were also before, by the way. So whatever you say, think about that. I think that's my belief. Tell me 3 things or 2 or 3 things that you're seeing that really inform that similar principle, because that's a theme we hear from Tech Safari as well, that this is the place to be. This is where the energy is, the ideas are. So what are you seeing that really informs that point of view?
Yeah, I mean, like if you just look at a demographics level, it's like, what is it? It's 1/3 of the world would be African by 2050. And I think by 2100, it should be like 50%. That's crazy. That's like half the world will be from this continent. So if you're looking about where the future lies if you're a Fortune 500 company, it likely is looking back here. How do you develop a relationship with the continent? So just at that level, that's enough to warrant like really, really thinking about the continent if you are someone who's building here or building abroad. I also think that it's a place where we have a set of, I would say, problems and opportunities that we can solve that we need to solve ourselves, and solve with solutions that are really contextualized to our challenges. And I think sometimes, and what we're seeing a bit of, and I want to see way more of, and we probably will see this, is you find a solution to a challenge on the continent, you scale it across the continent, then you even take it global. And there are some really incredible companies that are doing Africa to the world, and I think that to me feels like where the future could be. There's like a vehicle financing company called Move, and what they do is essentially like drive to earn. So if you're an Uber driver, you can go through Move and have the car financed while you try to earn it, which means you can essentially like get a job almost instantly and own a car. That technology, I mean, one of their investors from last year was Uber, who used them to scale across the globe. Use that technology to scale across the globe. So it's like an African innovation now being scaled globally. And I think we're seeing more of that, even Paystack being acquired by Stripe. A lot of these global companies looking at, hey, this is a great innovation. How do we take this and really embed it into our stack? So yeah, I think because we're constrained, we come up with better solutions, which means that these are like better solutions for scale across the world too.
Okay, so the flip of that, what's holding us back from reaching our full potential?
I had a conversation with someone about this today, and someone asked me a really good question, which was, what do you think is holding us back more out of the 3? How would you rank them? Talent, policy, or capital?
Before you answer, I want to hear what you guys might see.
Nice.
What was it? Talent?
Policy?
Policy?
Or capital?
Capital. So who says talent is holding us back? Correct. Okay. Who says it's policy? Okay, a good number, 60%. Okay, and the last one was capital, money. Okay, the rest of the 30%, oh no, more like almost half goes there. Okay, what was your take?
What do you think the answer is?
100% policy, yeah. And only because I'm also comparing Ethiopia, where you have to have an Ethiopian co-owner for almost anything, which means we're gonna develop slower, but we're gonna own it. The other app besides Ride that's so funny is this app called Faras, which means horse. And when you call the Faras on the app, it actually makes the sound of the horse. So local. It's like, guys, okay. So, but that is policy in Ethiopian policy that if you're going to own a house you can't own land anyway, or business, you have to have an Ethiopian co-owner. So me, I'm policy. But what do you think?
You guys are not going to like this. I think it's talent.
Well, thank you for coming, Caleb. Just kidding.
Thanks, guys. Let me explain. And people don't like this. Actually, we talked about this. We wrote about this a few weeks ago. In any so specifically in technology, right? So we're talking about that space. In any technology ecosystem, it takes about 15 to 20 years before you see anything that's like high value and high growth. So I'll give you an example. In India, the first wave of startups of founders who came back and built did not actually do that well. Very few succeeded. Same with Latin America. And it's not until you have about 3 or 4 generations of startups that you have serious winners that can do very well. I'll give you an example. Jumia, I mean, who knows about Jumia's story? Cool, incredible growth story, but actually just did not have fundamentals to scale. And now that whole business model is changing. They went public on the NASDAQ. They had this incredible rise, but when you look at fundamentals, it actually wasn't there. It had just scaled super quickly. What happened though, and the interesting thing is, from that company, so many people had developed skills, had learned how to build companies, that they're now going on to build their companies next. And so it's a really interesting case study. And actually, most of those companies won't succeed either. That's actually what it means to build a startup. It means that you're accepting odds of 1 in 10 that you actually succeed, even if you're the best. Luck can blow you over, policy can blow you over. And so what we need is basically a class or many, many more founders who are building these world-class companies, learn the lessons and build their next companies from what they learn. And I'll give you one more example. We have PayPal in the US. The alumni from there were Elon Musk, Peter Thiel, Reid Hoffman, all these people who built other companies. Paystack is maybe an equivalent here, where a lot of that talent went on to build new companies and are doing well. But we need 100 more Paystacks before we're at a point where we have a massive tech ecosystem. So it's not about the quality of talent. It's actually about the amount of experience. The total amount of experience you can have in the tech space is 10 years, because that's how old we are. These guys who are building in the US have had decades of experience. I hope that makes sense. I hope you guys don't hate me.
Well, there will be a Q&A later, so you can bring the heat to Caleb at that time. Felix, if I can ask you just to cue up those pictures, because you've written about this quite a lot, the investment infrastructure, you've written about this talent pool, and it's interesting to hear your take on the fact that some of it's just a time. So I'm not hearing that we just have not enough talent, it's that we haven't had time to develop it, which is true and is a product of colonialism and history, and there is a debt the world owes to us. I want to take a look at this picture that you posted. Actually, you didn't post it. A couple months ago, those of you who are in the tech space, I'm sure, saw this picture from the Africa CEO Forum. I think it was being held in Abidjan. And the picture was from Alex Pereri, I don't know if I'm saying, or Axel Pereri, who said these are the 10 people who had gotten 100 million USD invested, and now we're, in his words, building Africa's future. So let's take a look, if we can, at this picture coming from our fantastic tech team. Can we appreciate the tech team who has to operate at a drop of a hat? Okay, so here's the picture, posted in LinkedIn on May 2025. How many of you saw this picture? Yeah, almost all of you. Okay, before I go to my question to Caleb, what was your feeling when you saw this picture? Maybe raise a hand if you felt no surprise here, what I expected. 2 people, okay. How many of you felt some emotion? I don't like this picture so much. Okay, I'm also with you. So this lit up a firestorm on every social media platform, because of these 10 $100 million receivers, and I think some of them were in the 200 million, only 3 of them are actually African. 1 is a woman, none of them are Black nationals, which matters. When it comes to Africa, I'm sorry, it matters. Tech Safari wrote about it, and I think it was you that authored this piece. Very, very thoughtful, much more hopeful than I thought it would be. So when it comes to this talent, policy, capital picture that you've painted for us, and this is the reality on the ground as of May 2025, tell me why your take was what it was. Tell us what your take was. And I found it really hopeful. So help us feel better, those of us who raised our hands about feeling emotional.
Okay, whoa, I'm in the hot seat.
Yes,
let me try to do this justice. So the article we wrote was called Expat as a Service, and the subtitle was "The Streets Say You Need a White Co-Founder." So that gives you a bit of our position, right? Which is like that seems to be reality. So let's break that down. And where we got to was we agreed that like having a national like a founder who is building on the continent and from the continent is so important for our ecosystem to be sustainable and to actually be, back to what I said in the beginning, like really grown from the continent and like us controlling our destiny. And so seeing this, I was like, damn, that's tough. But the other side of this is that when you look at other ecosystems, when you look at India, when you look at like Latin America, you find that a lot of the first wave do look like this. They do look like global people who are like, there's an opportunity here, I'm going to build a company. And then what happens is that, and it also looks like diaspora too. There's actually a lot more diaspora as well. And what happens is once you have the first set of companies, then you end up having people who are like from these markets who have learned from other people who built big companies, and then they go on to build their companies. And the analogy that we use in the end is like, if you guys, okay, let's say that we're Kenya and we're trying to build the best football team ever. Would you just keep your talent? Would you only let your Kenyan team play with Kenyans, or would you actually send them abroad or go get global talent to come and play with you so you can learn best practices and then build your own team? And if you look at Brazil used to do that too. Like Brazil has an incredible team. They don't need to go to the UK or go to Europe, but that took time.
Okay, do we buy this answer? Okay, some. Okay, so Q&A time, guys. Q&A time. Be ready. Actually, I do want to appreciate everyone. I want to come to your thing, but thank you for all the questions you submitted. They did shape our conversation tonight. I really appreciate the time you took to tell us what you wanted to learn, what was on your mind, and this idea of investment and who's getting it and how do I get it and how do I get closer to it was top of the curiosity pile in terms of what you wanted to talk about. So let's stay with this a little bit longer. Felix, if you don't mind putting up the next picture, which was this Jumia mafia that you talked about earlier. You referenced the PayPal mafia. And then in the same article, you talked about exactly what you just referenced right now a moment ago, which was that Jumia had this model that also started off with, when you look at the NASDAQ picture, when they went public, as two white dudes at the helm of Jumia, who had two other African co-founders who didn't stay on, I believe. But now there has been this domino effect where they've gone on to found other companies. I think my question, and I want to know if you agree, or my observation is that when we are the first generation post-colonialism or post-independence, we don't have the spare margins to take a lot of risk. And yet, because the markets don't have enough jobs, we have to take a risk. How many of you have a side business? How many of you have two? That's like everybody. Everybody has a side, right? Because we are still in a generation that has to build on our own, and we don't have the margin for risk. So I'm curious if maybe the fourth thing out of those three things, talent, capital, policy, should have been appetite for risk. Because how many of us, I'm the first generation, my grandparents could not read. They were completely illiterate. Business people, hustlers, but they couldn't access education, and certainly not, they would be blown away, right, if they were in the room tonight. So I wonder if you have a thought on that. Yeah. I
think that's an incredible point. And one that I think I would say that in our tech bubble, we always no one considers that. And there's so much validity to that. In fact, my own story, my folks moved just before they had me, and they were pretty lucky. Out of our family, they were able to move to Australia, and their life trajectory became quite different. And that's why I can take a risk, because I know that I have support from my family. That's the only reason I can justify trying to build a business like this for a long period of time. So I totally agree with this. I just think that, we need to figure out how do we really de-risk that? How do we make it less risky to go and build a business or go and learn at a company and do that the right way? And I'd say maybe one of the things that I see is this sense of in doing multiple things, well, not in doing multiple things, but there's almost an immediate, when people say, okay, I want to build a company, I want to be a founder, there's such a bias towards doing that. When actually maybe what's better to do is to learn from the best, to join a company that's doing a great job, and accrue skills and actually become super, super valuable. And then go off and do your thing. And I think that's one of the things that I've seen, and I've actually invested in a few companies too. I've seen a lot of first-time founders actually make very avoidable mistakes that you would actually pick up if you worked at another tech company and you saw that company go through it. So I think that there's this element of like maybe before jumping in, spending the time just to learn and become the best, and then do that.
As you were coming in tonight, we asked you to have a name tag and then also to get a yellow sticker if you felt like you had something to offer somebody here. Because one of the comments we got in the registration is that people really wanted meaningful connection. They didn't want to just come to another event. So hopefully some of you put a yellow sticker on your shirt to say, yes, I'm willing to kind of share what I've learned, or I'm willing to. So when we close, find those yellow stickers to pick up some of those things that Caleb is talking about in terms of things that we can learn from each other. Maybe you don't have the appetite to start something now, but maybe you have an appetite to have another glass of wine and talk to somebody, you know? Because we are each other's best resources, isn't it? Like, we are our own natural resources. It's the people in this room. And I think that's an incredible service that Tech Safari is also doing by creating these events and the meetups that you're doing. Felix, if you can cue up the first clip, there is a great organization called the Jasiri Network, which is connecting founders in the diaspora to those on the ground. Founded by a Kenyan woman, her name is Nancy Masila, and they had their first convening in late last year. And the whole point is that there are some of us who are in the diaspora, some of us who are at home, some of us who have never left, but we should know each other. We should build on each other. And she had a lovely insight. She was quoting somebody else about not looking for unicorns, but looking for rhinos, because this is, wow, Yemi Alade would be so sad. This is, indeed. So I would love for us to just hear what she said. Sorry, Felix, if you can restart that. And then I'd love to hear your reflection, Caleb.
I feel like it's, again, that connection and that bridge and learning from each other. There's so much to kind of borrow from both ends. And the transfer could either through be resources, financial, knowledge, experience. Like, there's so many things I feel we could kind of borrow through each other. And I liked what Enos Westwood, the country director for the UK Kenyan Tech Hub, said. It's like, abroad in the Western markets, you want unicorns, but on the African continent, you want rhinos. I thought that was so powerful, because when you're building for Africa, you need people who understand Africa problems, African solutions. I loved it, and I think that's what we need.
Yeah, I loved that. I loved that thought of rhinos. I hadn't heard it put that way. So, Caleb, you know, when you're looking, I want to ask you kind of a reflection on that, but framing it as, what can Sydney be learning from Nairobi and vice versa? What can we learn from each other with this idea that we need to build African solutions for Africa? And then, you know, where are you seeing that happen where it's uniquely African? You mentioned M-Pesa earlier. And I love that you actually, this is another great thing about Tech Safari, they always give you examples. It's not like ideas, or like, this is actually happening, guys, in Botswana, in Tanzania, or, you know, wherever. It's real life things that are happening. So yeah, tell me what Sydney and Nairobi can learn from each other. And then beyond that, you know, how are African founders maybe thinking differently? You know, what are they doing that's different that allows them to survive in this really competitive
before that, like, how would you define a rhino? Like, tell me, what's your idea of what a rhino is?
Thank you for the question. Thank you for the question.
Thanks. Mine's been out.
Well, sadly, I think rhinos are just as rare. Unicorns don't exist, by the way, but rhinos are rare, but they exist. They're incredibly powerful. Do you know they're actually the fastest land animal? I think. Okay, maybe not cheetah, obviously, but like, really? The most dangerous. Okay, forget my facts, forget my Nat Geo facts, but they're very dangerous. I mean, you don't want to see a rhino coming at you. They look big, but they're incredibly, thank you for the head nods, thank you for affirming me. They're definitely super dangerous, and they can kill you once. They only need one touch. So I feel like us as Africans, we're resilient, we're rare when we reach that pinnacle of like global success, because there's so many barriers, and yet we have killer instincts, and we have killer impact and influence. Is that okay? Thank you.
That was great.
Okay.
That was fair. How do I even back that up? That's cool. I totally agree. I think we have more rhinos than unicorns here. And I mean, the definition of a unicorn is $1 billion company. I would say that actually almost doesn't really matter here. It's a primary metric for investors. They're like, how many $1 billion companies does this continent have? But actually, what's more important is this sustainable? Is it having an impact? Is it something that's going to be like high growth? And I think actually this is almost like anti the whole tech spirit, but some of the highest growth businesses are not technology businesses. They're just like businesses that are run really well, really efficiently, maybe leveraging technology, but solving a unique challenge that has high growth potential. Like some of the biggest businesses are like nut processing machines, palm oil nut, like some of the most boring things you'll see, or just services like recruitment, but just done really well. So I think what is way more important is how do we especially for this region, like how do we consistently build great, durable, and sustainable businesses that will keep going, that don't rely on like funding and don't rely on that to grow. I think there's a massive opportunity we don't look at there. And then if you do need funding to grow, how do you do that sustainably and across markets? We have this piece that we wrote, which is called Launching to Survive. And it's just like, it captures the reality of African companies. It's like, you get to one market, you're in Kenya, but you've just raised money, so you have to go somewhere else to launch this product. And then you're in Uganda and you're starting to learn like the regulation there, how to actually launch there. Then by the time you saturated that market, you're in Ethiopia. And these are like 3 different markets to launch into. Sydney, like if you build in Sydney, you built for Australia, you've actually also built for the US. And so that's a key difference that we need to be conscious of. And that's why sustainability is so important. What can we learn from Sydney? I don't know. I feel like one of the things that we have done well, one of the things that I think Australia does really well is, I don't know if anyone follows the Olympics and how Australians go, but they overperform. Like Australia's a small country. There's only like 23, 25 maybe million of us now. But we have like overperformance in both the Olympics and sport, but also in technology. And I think would love to see more of that here, where we have like smaller populations, but like just really excellence when it comes to building technology solutions and investing. And I think that comes because, actually, I don't know why we overperform. Maybe we're just like...
Well, I think it goes back to your thing earlier. What is the infrastructure there that maybe makes that possible? Whether that's, if you take sports, there was conversation in Kenya after the last Olympics that can we invest in something other than just running, right? Can we invest in our swimmers? Can we invest in there's a young woman who's a fencer. Can we invest in other things? We don't just have rugby players and runners here. We could do so many things, but maybe it's a policy matter. Maybe it's a investment from government. I mean, there's many things. You've touched on the fact that this is a challenge when you're scaling. I'm blown away by that if you build for Australia, you've built for America. That's wild to me because, like we said earlier, Ethiopia and Kenya, we can't necessarily even talk the same language. So how do you advise? Because you're coming into touch with founders and innovators and startup people, and then you're also talking to investors. What advice do you give about managing the regulatory framework? Because there's no way around that, right? We have to deal with the reality on the ground.
Yeah, well, you might say there's no way around that. Founders find ways around that. Like
this is Kenya. There's always a way around, isn't there? So you're right. Yes.
I feel like a lot of actually tech companies don't even. They're just like, let's just do it. Let's do it until we have to get regulated. So that's one of the ways. But I just think it is tough. It just means you have to be sustainable. You have to know your numbers. You have to like understand why you're launching in that market. You have to do your research. And actually, a lot of big companies that had potential failed because they launched too quickly. Or they got beaten back out of a market that they didn't understand. And we actually see this a lot in Anglophone versus Francophone countries, so like French-speaking African countries, where someone's like, oh, cool, let me just do this payment model, but in Côte d'Ivoire. And then you realize it's actually not just a different language, it's a different legal system. It's like civil in common? Yeah. So like a civil law system, which is just so different, different level of bureaucracy. So it's just something we need to be conscious of. And it's why we just, I would say, birth some of the strongest founders because they're tough. They have to go through this all the time. Versus in Australia, I mean, back to your point of risks, right? You can take big swings because you're generally comfortable in Australia. Whereas here, it's significantly harder to get to a point where you can even build a company, and it's harder to operate it. So I just have like, I don't know, like a lot of my friends in Australia who are building companies are doing a great job. I have way more respect for founders who can build in these markets.
I want to ask you, as you wrote, I think it was this week, I can't remember about, I don't think I'll say the word right, sachetization?
Yes,
right?
Sachetization. Yeah.
Sachetization. Do you guys know this term? It was new to me, but I'm not in the tech space. It was fascinating that if there's anything you can sell for 1,000 bob, like detergent, washing up powder, water, now this idea that you just sell it in small sachets, right? Is that basically what the term is? You just break it down to smaller things, and this reflects how this is how the economy works. This is what I can afford to buy. I can't afford 1 month's supply today, but I can afford the week's supply, which sounds like it's kind of like, this respect for like we're building for what's reality. I'd be curious from your point of view, is that something that can scale though? You look at that, you're like, so I'm just repackaging something that was packaged, Like, I see that, I'm like, that seems like a survival instinct, not necessarily a business plan. But am I wrong? Maybe, huh?
No, like I think you're right in that it can limit growth, but the weird thing about sachetization, I for the longest time I thought my team member came up with the concept. I was like, "You're a genius." And I was like, "Oh no, he found this from online." But it's this idea where exactly as you said it, you have like 1 kilogram of detergent, but instead you can break it down into like one sachet or sachet, whatever we want to call it, of like 20 grams. And you can buy that, which means instead of for buying for what you might need in the future, you buy for what you need right now. So it's a model of breaking down or like turning products that are high quality into something that like anyone can buy, because generally on a whole, across the continent, we earn less money. So it's built for that reality. Now, like, is that a negative thing? No, I think that actually, like a lot of these brands, you could say have done, like Indomie, the noodles brand has done super well across Africa. They did over $1 billion in sales all the time, selling noodles in these small packages. So it can definitely work. The more interesting question, and maybe where it gets problematic, is if you buy in small, like if you buy 100 gigabytes of data in one go, you might pay $20. If you buy 5 gigabytes like 20 times, you end up paying up to double that much. And so it actually keeps people in this system of spending more and not actually breaking out of like the cycle that they're in.
I guess that risk question is always with us. What is the appetite and the reality of risk in your lives? I want to shift gears big time. We are certainly all sitting with political movements everywhere, and in Kenya in particular, the last couple of years have been inspiring to see the voice of young people and people across walks of life really demand more. And we're seeing young people in protests use technology to serve a bigger goal. As much as I don't know if it was on Sabasaba or the 25th, the government was trying to shut down the networks and everything, and I saw it was kind of like, but young people were on their phones, they were connecting. It didn't matter if the radio stations went down. I'd love to hear you just speak to how you're seeing tech as a tool for political mobilization that's uniquely African. Because to me, I'm quite inspired as an elder now, moving into my ancestral era, by how young people, listen, do not let this hair fool you, it is all gray underneath, but I'm so inspired by how young people are innovating in the middle of quite hard times. So tell me about that, yeah.
Totally. No, I think that historically, when a government has wanted to turn off the tap of communication, they've been able to easily divide and say, you're not going to talk to this person and you can't organize. And I think what we've seen instead with the emergence of technology is, like Facebook and Meta came with this promise of unifying the world, and connecting people. But actually, it's an incredible tool for communication, coordination, when we need that, and when there is conflict or when there is political insecurity. So I think seeing that is really inspiring, and then seeing actually people build on top of that, like the finance bill GPT from last year, just such a cool thing to build and totally made sense. And now you can have anyone sort of message in Swahili or whichever dialect and have answers. Is just such an incredible proof point of how can we leverage technology for social impact and for social change. So it's a great tool. The only thing though is that just like everything, it's like sachetization, great product, but on the other side, it has a cycle. We also see it used the other way, where people will use that to incite things like hate speech, etc. So I think it's an incredible tool for social impact and coordination, but it needs checks and balances to make sure that people aren't able to use it for those purposes.
What I'm seeing is that also the checks and balances are coming from the people. People will be in the comments real quick, shutting people down, saying, that's not true. And actually, it was such and such, not such and such, which I'm seeing that feels different to me than 3 or 4 years ago, where it was like, if it was online, it was true. You know what I mean? But now there is this no. Actually, I'm going to read you the passage in the Constitution or wherever and actually bring you to the source, and people asking for that. So I'm hopeful that it can continue to be more positive than negative. Caleb, if you had to invest in one type of founder in East Africa right now, what would they be building? This is your time to take notes. One type of thing, what would they be building?
building in East Africa.
Sure,
for
let's
this
make
one.
it as regional as we
Or
can.
was it? Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Okay, that's tough. I don't have the specific thing, but like I feel like lately I have been super impressed by the potential. This is going to sound super boring to you guys, but like hear me out. Of agriculture, I think agriculture is such a massive sector. It contributes so much to the economy and is massive, and actually doesn't need a new like tech, like really like incredible tech solution. It just needs like really nice systems and good business building around it. And I think there's so much potential there. Like the more that I learn about it, the more I'm like, wow, this is way bigger than I thought. I don't know. That's a bit broad, but I think that would be the first sort of category.
Super broad. Too broad.
Too broad?
Yeah, but that's okay, guys. Question and answer session. Question and answer, that's when you follow up. But no, we're still an agriculturally focused economy, so that makes sense. And there's an ag tech sector, right?
Yeah, there is. Yeah. We might be launching something in that space soon, actually.
Okay.
Which should be cool. So look out for that. But I think like on the other side, like what do I think maybe is overhyped? I don't know if that's a valuable, but like I think the fintech train, we've been doing that for a long time. And haven't seen many meaningful companies come out of like at least Kenya in the fintech space, other than M-Pesa, which is just such an incredible innovation. But still, so I think to me, it's like I feel like that category is less interesting than maybe agriculture. Yeah. And then anything in the diaspora, like how do you build diaspora bridges, is super interesting to me as well.
It's so interesting to me to think that fintech, Pesa may have been our peak, but we're still sakoing. In Ethiopia, we have this thing called ukub. We're still gathering, at home. We're still saving together, and chamas and all that. So we're keeping some things analog, which I actually think is the beauty thing. I don't want to lose the analog, right? Because a chama is not just about the money. It's about the connection. It's about checking in with somebody, And so there's something, I think, uniquely African about our fintech models that are just fin models. Not the tech part so much, but still, I think, very valuable. My 2 cents, anyway.
Love that.
Okay, one last question, and then we're going to turn it over to you guys. Get ready. This is your chance to ask Caleb anything you want. Maybe not anything you want, guys. Be polite, but Okay, we can't close without talking about AI. Yes, and you guys had some fantastic writing recently about AI when it pertains to language in particular, and how what's going to happen if AI is not available in, forget Kiswahili, right? In Ma, or if I look to Ethiopia, if it's not available in Oromia, or if it's not available in languages that are not at the forefront of the developers' minds. I want to read you a quote from Ginny Rottney, who's the former CEO of IBM. She said, AI will not replace humans, but those who use AI will replace those who don't. That's a really sobering thought. Do you guys get me? AI won't replace us, but those who use AI will replace those who don't. So if we think about our languages, and in the continent alone, we're in the thousands of languages that are not embedded into AI programs. What's the future look like? What does today look like given that context?
Yeah, really, really good question. And definitely something we think about and write about a lot, and we hear a lot like from different companies we work with about AI. I think that we have the AI conversation a lot, but we don't necessarily build that much that's uniquely for the continent or uniquely African in the AI space. And so I'm really curious I'm actually trying to find more companies that are doing this. There's a few that are helping contextualize AI to more local use cases. Whether it's language is a big one. There's a few companies that are starting to say, hey, how do we really embed, like, what would it mean to have someone in rural Rwanda, for instance, call a bank, and instead of having to go to a local branch to set up an account, they can just talk to someone, and it's actually AI in the back end. And I think that's a really interesting use case that requires a lot of localization. You have to train a new model. It has to know Kinyarwanda or whichever language or dialect. But I think that's the one section where I see a lot, and then the rest is kind of more, okay, how do we put an AI wrapper on something or embed it? And I'd love to see more from the continent, in embedding AI.
I'm curious, for those of you here, how many of you are using ChatGPT or Perplexity or whatever app you like in a language other than English? How many of you are using a platform? So, do you mind saying what language you're using? Swahili? And what's your success rate, do you think, in terms of the back and forth and the usefulness? Not very accurate. Okay. That's what I was wondering. And Kiswahili is let me get this right because I just looked it up. I think it's right there with Arabic as like the most prominent language. 200 million people, I think, speak Kiswahili across the continent. So it's one of our top languages. Anybody else using another language other than English and other than Kiswahili? Yes. Yes, please. What language are you using? Amharic. Amharic yan date no. Stina getting. How's it going with Amharic? Do you find it successful? Because that's a whole nother character. This is not even just, we're using the Giz alphabet, 256 characters. How do you find AI?
I mean, when it started, when it just came out, it was very bad, to say the least. But now it's really getting better.
Okay.
Even with the punctuations and the localizations of those even slangs. So I see it learning in real time.
Okay, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Do you think that's because it's learned you and you're using it enough to now have a rapport with it? Or do you think that the actual technology is better?
I think it's the actual technology because I don't use it on a day-to-day basis for Amharic versus the English version that I use. So maybe for the English, it's learning me. I see it's learning me. It's starting to sound like me, look like, you know?
Yeah.
But for the Amharic one, I just see it getting better grammatically and in overall understanding of how it composes the answers.
That's actually incredible because, again, Amharic is a totally different alphabet.
Yeah.
This is the Amharic back here, you know, so the fact that it's improving on grammar, that's incredible.
Yeah.
Wow, and scary a bit, but okay, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you also, Dada, who shared over here. Really important to think about these language models. If you have an interest around that language AI piece, definitely let's connect afterwards. It's something I think a lot of us are thinking about and desperate to see, especially young people, the education opportunities. You were referencing at the beginning the young man who put all of his textbooks on WhatsApp. You know, I'm sure some of that was possible. Maybe, I don't know if he did English, but imagine now if that's possible, you know, in a multitude of languages across the continent. It's a really powerful idea. Okay, I have one more question for you, and then question answer. Are you guys ready for Q&A? You're still okay? Anyone sleeping? Okay, good. I see you, by the way. Okay, in 2030, actually, let's make it 2040. Let's put a 15-year mile marker on it. What kind of headline do you hope Tech Safari is writing about? And what must we do today to make that headline possible?
That's really interesting. In 15 years, I would say that if we are writing an incredible headline about African tech and innovation, we're not telling a story of how a company here has received investment or how much money was raised. We'd be telling a story about how we have actually exported our model globally. So we've either helped implement technology at a global level somewhere else. We've acquired a large company instead of having like Stripe acquire Paystack. It's like, I don't know, Cellular acquiring like another fintech. It's really, it's actually one of the pieces I spoke to earlier, which is Africa to the world. And that at scale. We have a sophisticated ecosystem, a strong ecosystem that sustains itself, has its own capital sources as well, and then it's making moves globally as well outside of the continent. I think that to me is like an incredible vision of us in 15 years. Take a ton of work to get there, and it takes like, again, these reps and having like more founders learn so they can build companies and do well so that like it doesn't look just like that picture, and it's more like we have more solutions from here. But it is possible with the right pushes.
We're going to see a bunch of us in Estonia with that picture, the Africans who are building Estonia. Thank you for that, Caleb. I love Tech Safari because it is just, you know, whenever you're feeling like, this thing is not working, read Tech Safari. You'll feel so much more hopeful and energized and inspired by what's happening. Not what could, but what is actually now, right? Not just next, but what's now. Do we have questions ready? We have a couple people with questions? Okay. Now, let me tell you, my friends, my Kenyans. Now, I'm not a Kenyan, but I've lived here a long time. And I've been to enough question and answers that people stand and they say, me, it's just a small company. Wait, it is never small. This must be small, okay? We want to get to as many questions as we can, so we don't need a comment. Comments are for networking. Comments are for? Unless you just want to say thank you so much, Caleb, and it's quick. Otherwise, make your questions short. Is that okay? We're still friends? You're still smiling at me? Okay, Asantini. Okay, where do we start? Who has the first question for us? Oh my, okay. Okay, we're going to try
came
and
up
give...
so quickly.
Yeah. Okay,
They're
let's
loaded.
start at the back because I see that Selina's already there. Please say your name if you don't mind. And maybe briefly like, I'm a founder, I'm a teacher, whatever, if you don't mind.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah. Thank you so much. I am currently a corporate buddy. Not yet. I still have. I have my side hustle. Don't worry. Yes. So thank you so much for this. This has been wonderful. My question for Caleb: which startup stories or founder journeys do you feel in Africa or in Kenya are still underrepresented?
Underrepresented stories in the continent. Great
that
question.
Need to be told a little bit more.
Can you hear everyone? That mic, maybe we can get a little bit more volume on the blue mic. But thank you for your question. Excellent, Caleb. And I'll ask you to make your answers quick too. Would you rather gather all the questions first, even though I feel like yeah? Okay, let's take 2 more questions and then we'll pause and then we'll take a few more after that. Okay, one more question, or another one? Selina, why don't we come here to the front? You two can duke it out, Peter and Aman, who wants to take the question. Okay, good.
Hello, my name is Aman. I'm the Chief Operating Officer from Young Stripes. My question comes from a perspective that's outside tech. I'm not a tech person. But, okay, if you look at your examples of India and China, for example, and how like tech is booming in their countries, in Africa, we have not had our industrial revolution yet, in my opinion. And most tech solutions in those countries almost went hand in hand with the industrial revolution, creating solutions for the industrial revolution. In Africa, we haven't had that yet. Do you think that's one of the reasons why we are kind of lagging behind in this space? Thank you.
Great, thank you, Aman. Thank you for that. Okay, let's go to this side, our Western neighbors, my West anyways. Okay, Selina, I don't want to pick the people. Okay, how about this young lady here? Yes, please, your name and question.
Do I need to stand?
Sure, please.
Okay. Hi, my name is Nkina. So just a small comment. Oh, sorry. No, I'm kidding.
Okay.
I'm kidding. I'm a financial consultant, podcaster, and a new founder. So my question is, based on what you've commented about talent, what is the type of founder you would invest in, as opposed to the industry or the company? What is the type of person you'd invest in?
I love that question. Okay, we're going to pause there. We'll take a few more, but we'll give Caleb a chance to...
These are so hard.
Yeah, you guys should have just been with me the whole time.
No, but let's get started. So there was a question here about what stories are underrepresented in Kenya. So like which stories do we not hear enough of? I think there's to me, there's immediately 2 answers that come up. So the first is we really glorify founders and people who build companies once they raise money, which is absolutely crazy. When you raise money, that's when you're getting ready to do the next thing. You've actually already done the thing and you built this incredible company and you're getting ready to do the next thing. So that feels like the wrong milestone. I think that there's many companies that have not raised capital but have done incredible things, turned around their companies, had impact, or even don't raise money at all that we rarely talk about because it's just not what gets a headline. And I think that's a problem. And that's actually one of our like core things with our thesis is we don't need you to have raised capital to write about what's happening if the impact is there or if it's an interesting story. So that's a really important thing and something that I think some people are a bit tired of in the ecosystem. The other category is you don't also have to be a founder or an investor to build something incredible. I think we don't talk about operators enough, people who power the companies. We only talk about the face of the company, and that's problematic because the people behind the company is what makes it happen. And to build something meaningful, like you need an incredible team that puts in the same amount, if not like more work sometimes than the founder and the CEO. And so I think more of those stories I'd love for them to be told too. It's just not as dramatic or as exciting as the hero CEO or founder. And we probably need less of that, to be honest. So those are my 2 takes on what I think we could talk more about.
Is your podcast about tech? It's about finance. Let's get some finance underrepresented stories. Maybe there's a collab here 100%. That could happen.
More CFOs, yeah. So good. Okay, on the question, so could technology and its development be connected to not having an industrial revolution? Was that broadly the question? Yeah. I actually don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. I think that like what I could comment on, because it's such a good question, but I honestly don't know. So it's too hard. But what I will say is there's always been this sort of question or like concept that is a little bit, like people have different takes on it, but it's this idea of leapfrogging. Just, do we need an industrial revolution, or do we need to, like, an example of this actually is across the continent, not cell phones. What were they called? Remember the
Landlines. Wow.
I forgot what they were called.
You see how young this
You
one
knew
is?
instantly,
He's like,
though.
what were they called? Mommy, what were they called? Yeah, they were called landlines.
Auntie, come on. Those things you had at your house. Yeah, landlines. I actually forgot what they were called. That's crazy.
We forgive you. We forgive you. Me and the ancestors forgive you.
Landlines. So across the US, right? Like there's a crazy stat. It's like in Manhattan itself in the US had more landlines than all of Africa. Africa only got to 3% landline penetration. Not because it couldn't afford to. Like actually telcos were being set up everywhere, but because it skipped that entirely and went straight to mobile phones. Because it was like cheaper, more affordable, and you could do more on your mobile phone. So that's an example of like leapfrogging in practice. You could actually skip that whole era that we all had, where we had those annoying landlines that would always call. So like perhaps there are more spaces that technology could get us over, but I don't think it's everything. I definitely don't think it's like fundamentally just building great businesses that aren't tech enabled, or like that aren't technology companies. So it's not a direct answer, but that's maybe one idea to put out there.
And then we have the question, and what's your podcast? Tell us. Yeah.
It's called Money Moves Diary. I try and tell stories about real people's experiences with money and their financial journeys. So,
love it.
Yeah, if you'd love to be a guest, anyone in the room could hit me up after
Love
this.
it. Afterwards,
Nice.
you got the yellow sticker on?
Yes,
Perfect.
I
Money, say the whole thing again.
Money Moves Diary.
Money Moves Diary.
Yes.
Love it. Well done to you. That's not
Thank
easy to do.
you.
Well done. So the kind of founder, right? Not just the industry, but what kind of founder would you be looking to invest in?
Yeah, cool. So if you took away the company and the industry, like what would you invest in if you were just looking at the person? It's a really good question. In fact, most VCs at the early stage only think about this. They don't even care because they're like, if the person's strong enough, they'll build a viable company. Typically, what I would look at is, has this person proven that they can do this or something like this? So typically you look at, have they built a similar company, or have they built a company? What gives them unique like insights into this space? An incredible example is this company I invested in the travel space, and the guy who started it had built a massive travel business before that, but was like, hey, I wanted to solve this problem that I had and my family had when we were running our travel business, and I did it with technology. And he scaled that and actually got into Y Combinator, or like et cetera, et cetera. So like, and he's a founder from Kenya. So it's really like, do they have the domain expertise and do they fit the problem well? Then the second one is, man, it is so hard building a company. Like I can't tell you, and like even just a media company, like kudos to you. Keep doing it. It takes a long time to get it moving. It's hard. And so does this person have the grit to get through it? And one of the things that I look at that I think is super important, and that if you don't have, you might not do as well, is like, have you had like a, kind of your on your knees moment where like stuff has just gone so far south and you have to pull yourself out of that and come back? And sometimes it's not building a business. Sometimes it's like a loss. Sometimes it's like going through a really difficult like childhood, like whatever that is. But that is so important because it's like the resilience you will need as a founder to build a company. So it's a bit weird, but I think those are the things. It's like the grit and resilience, and then also ability to execute and do that thing.
I like that, because those aren't things you learn in school. Those are things you can become. So that feels hopeful. Okay, this gentleman here with the white hoodie has been raising his hand since he walked in the door at 6 p.m. So let's take his question. And then we have two more. Okay, Dada here who gave us the Kiswahili example. Then, is this gender balanced? I want to make sure I represent. Okay, then the gentleman here with the bluish green, and then that will be the wrap for the questions. And we're keeping them short.
We listen, but we don't judge.
Trust me, my friend, I will judge. Tell us your name and
Okay, my name is Steve. I'm a photographer. I'm grateful to be in this event. My question is about the picture you raised and the policy conversation you started. You mentioned about policy, and you gave us a good example about, I think you gave us, either one of you gave us a good example about Ethiopia and how the policy is that when you want to start something, there needs to be someone from probably the country. And the other picture you showed us is the countries is a complete reverse of that, because we're having people who are interested to probably develop architecture, tech architecture in our countries as Africans, but we're already profiling that aspect of they need to be Africans so that they can understand us in a way. So personally, in one or another, I need to understand from you why policy, and maybe a bit more why talent is the key thing, because Nairobi is believed to be like a tech hub in East Africa. So which talent is missing in Nairobi? Maybe the infrastructure. In Ethiopia, maybe, I don't know. So I'll want to learn about why you said policy and probably why you said talent. Thank you.
Thank you for that. That's a great question. And Newton, maybe I can ask you as a creative economy practice lead, maybe you have a thought on that as well, since you really live in that space. Okay, then we were going to Dada here. Yes.
I'd also like to think I'm a bit loud, but well and good.
It's for the recording, so.
Thank you. My name is Usla. I work with the Australian High Commission. I'm glad to be here. On the Jumia Mafia, I'd trust someone who has tried and failed. That's me. But is that the kind of culture we want to build in our young people, that I'm only joining this company so that I can go start my... Because it's not, we're not just seeing that with startups, we're also seeing that with employment. I'm stepping here, while I'm eating this one, I'm looking at that one. And we end up missing out on experience. I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
The first marriage to get ready for the second. Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you for that. Thank you. These are my age mates laughing here. Okay, me, I'm happily married though. I should say that.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Tony. I operate in the sports industry. I'm a sports person. And today I wanted to actually get to see your ideas on the impact of AI and the general technological advancements on our social fabric. Starting with around June this year, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology gave out a report that was saying that people who use AI tend to be 93% less productive without AI as compared to those that don't use. And there's a detailed report that says whoever uses AI within 10 minutes won't remember 93 to 98% of whatever they used. So what's your take on that, and how do we get to say that AI does not turn us into zombies, actually, but it increases our mental capacity? Another part is, like you said, in Kenya, or maybe Africa at large, I don't know the rest of Africa, there's the whole thing of chamas like table banking and stuff. And you mentioned something like, it is not only about the money, it's also about the interaction and everything. So when we talk of technological advancements, how do we get to bridge the gap between global expectations and local realities that will want us to go advanced technologically, but now I can just send my money to her without seeing her, and then we forget the whole part of interaction. So how do we bridge the gap? Thank you.
Great questions. Okay, thank you. I'm getting a reminder of time, so Caleb, hard for you to make it short. We have some wonderful giveaways. So if you can stick around, please keep sticking around. But if you have to step out, we also appreciate that. But Caleb, the first question was over here, the gentleman, the two questions, really talent and policy.
Yeah. I think you picked policy as your fave, so I'd be keen to hear your perspective as well. But
I will say quickly, but then Newton, I would love to hear your thoughts. Selena, if you can maybe get the mic to Newton there. My thought on policy is, even as a creative in the media industry here in Kenya, if you try and bring in cameras, for example, the taxation on the equipment that doesn't exist anywhere else is so prohibitive that we are forced to now allow, I'll use Nat Geo, to come in here with their equipment, film, and then leave, because we don't have the equipment on the ground, because our infrastructure has not allowed us to import those things without a high tax burden. I think some of those goods for the creative industry were seen as like luxury items, when you're thinking, no, if I don't have a camera, if I don't have a mic that pixelates at this degree or can project, I can't do my work. So for me, that's a policy issue. There are a million. I mean, you are a photographer, isn't it? How many of the others are in the creative industry? I'd be curious to see if this is a shared reality, but I feel like there's so many prohibitive natures there. And then there's just some issue of tax. Last year, a 2% tax was introduced around advertising. So our company was added a 2% tax from a partner that's on top of everything else. We're like, really? So to me, that's a government and policy issue. I'm not saying it's unique to Kenya or Africa. It's not. It's just that in Ethiopia, the policies are structured. It used to be, I don't know if my sisters here have a different point of view, was really protective of Ethiopians owning. It cost us something. Our development was not the same as Kenya. But now if you go to a hotel or a lodge, for the most part in Ethiopia, it's owned by an Ethiopian. That is changing in some places. But I think that policy piece has to be in service of the people. That's my quick take. Sorry, it wasn't very quick. Newton, do you have a thought on that, on what you're seeing around policy in Kenya? And then Caleb, around the talent.
Thank you. Definitely, yes. I think when it comes to my side, I'll definitely go with the policy. I believe the talent is there. The guy in the white hoodie is part of our community, so...
Is it Jonathan, right?
Jonathan?
Steven.
Is part of our community, so I'll definitely go with policy, but part of me also tries to agree with Caleb when it comes to talent, and I can go into more details in terms of my observation for the past 1 year, running some programs where they're accessible to creatives for free, but it's more like you still have to push them to be able to join community and access some of the facilities for free. But definitely policy plays a big part, and hopefully in the near future with the Maandamano, we can see a different different thing. So
and I will say that to me the policy is also like the education system, right? If we're not teaching humanities or critical thinking or all these other things in our education, our kids are not getting it there, then we're forcing them to go elsewhere, and then we're not building a talent pool that can then meet the demands of someone who was mentioning the global expectations. So to me that policy also sits there.
So the question on talent was how, like, what does it look like if talent is actually solved for? Was that accurate?
Yeah, I kind of want to hear more of your thoughts on
cool. Okay.
Talent.
So the best metric for talent is actually pretty simple in the end. And it's not the nicest, but it's just like, have we actually built meaningful companies that generate revenue, attract investment, and do well in the market? That's it. Like, there's no other metric for investment. Like, you will not find investors on pipe dreams. Like, in good markets, maybe sometimes, but do you have fundamental companies that are growing and doing well? And the reality is we do, but most of them look like founders who are up there. So why is that? And what do we need to bridge that gap? That's the question to answer. And like, actually, I know most of the founders who are up there. I knew about that dinner. I was in Abidjan when it was happening. I didn't go. I had too much work to do. Lucky, otherwise.
Where else? Yeah.
But the truth is, these guys are exceptional founders. They're great people. They have built companies here before. Like, you know, one of them, Zach from Nigeria, has like lived in Nigeria for ages, started a bank there, is now building another thing. Like, these guys are like, they've decided to, you know, to build on the continent because they actually see meaning in it. Genuinely incredible people. But they've also done it in a global context. Like, they've actually done this, like, you know, Axel has been building companies in Australia. He's an Australian citizen, been building companies there for a long time, right? So these are people who have generated revenue, which at the end of the day is the main goal. And now they're doing it in these markets. And I think it's actually good that they're here because there's a lot that we can like learn from that and then ideally build our own. Like, I got my start at a company with a friend who had built amazing companies in the past. I joined him to get the experience to go build my own. And that to me is what like a good talent looks like. And hopefully people will come out of Tech Safari and like be incredible at like writing, at telling stories, and build their own things. That's a great thing. So that's how I view talent. And like, you know, I know it doesn't feel nice, you know, like not seeing yourself up there. It pains me too, trust me. Like, but that is how it goes. And hopefully in 10 years, we see enough folks being like learning, building their own companies and doing great things.
Is it a fair assessment to say that they're not taking the place of Black African founders? It's just that they don't exist at that scale of the $100 and $200 million success rate?
Like, yes. And let me ask a question, another uncomfortable one. how many Kenyan tech companies are making over 5 million a year in revenue? Most of the companies up there are doing a lot more than that. So what does that tell us? It's not about like, yeah, of course they'll attract more funding than companies like that. So that's the challenge we have to look at. Like, how do we actually improve that? Do local founders need more support? Do they need to get into programs like YC? How can we support them with that? Rather than just like shitting on these people, like it's like, actually, let's look at fundamentals. What businesses have they built? Why have they attracted that capital? It's not because they're white. It's because they built like actually good companies. And why is that? You know, how do we actually fix it at that level? Yeah.
I think it's still a struggle for me because it feels opportunistic for people to say, hey, I'm going to come here. Labor is cheap. Another policy thing. If the government's not protecting our labor laws and our labor wages, people are going to come and build here because they can hire 30 people what will cost them 1 elsewhere in Europe, you know? So that to me is, it's opportunistic at times. It feels opportunistic, first of all. Secondly, I'm like, let me look at your board. Your board better be stacked full of Black Africans if you're the face of the company, because there's no way you're building on the ground for Africans without that voice in your head. And if you haven't given them a seat of power and influence, if you're just using your buddies who you drink with to inform your model as opposed to putting them in a place of power, that's problematic to me. But you know what? The power is also in our hands. Who are we giving our money to? When someone comes to us with an app and says, oh, this is my cousin's building this app, but we still want to use Glovo or something. I'm not saying just, being convenienced all the time, but I'm saying we also have to invest in ourselves. The economic power is actually in our hands. Where you holiday, who owns the place, right? Where you take your business. What I'm wearing tonight, these are Black Kenyan-owned businesses because I will not wear anybody else, So that really matters. That adds up over time. And so if we want to change that picture, some of that is on us as consumers and where we're putting our money.
Do you mind me touching on this a bit more? I know
Sure.
about time, but I think this is super interesting. I agree with the sentiment with a lot of this. I do think that the opportunity cost that these guys, I think all these guys would make significantly more money if they did this in the US or Europe. So I actually think these guys are doing, and I know them, they're doing it not because there's a ton of money on the African continent. There's actually way less money to raise here. Trust me, it's hard. They're doing it because there's a meaningful problem. I feel connected to the place. I've lived here for a while, or I feel some sense of connection. And I think that's where I find it challenging. It's like knowing these founders are doing it and they're taking a hit, but they want to do it. And they actually do care about this. In fact, almost all of them spoke about this afterwards. We totally agree with this, some of this sentiment. The other is that talking about opportunity to take risk and privilege, it's easy to say, hey, let's not support that and support something local. But at the end of the day, if a product like Glovo is twice or half the price as a local product, you're going to take Glovo.
But this is what we have to stop. This is what I'm saying. We have to stop. These pants are more expensive than what I would find at Gap or Old Navy, but I will buy it because it's going where I want it to go.
But the masses cannot do that.
But
because the masses will have to choose between.
If we don't start doing it, the masses will never, though, because then it's generating income for this guy to have their next company, right? To start the lower level CaliWorks, shout out to CaliWorks, version of themselves, right? Cali Junior, which can be now cheaper because enough people bought CaliWorks. You know what I'm saying?
Interesting. Yeah, that's a fair perspective. Yeah, I think personally, I would I should do more of this, and we should because we can. But the average person using a fintech app and to transfer money is hey, I don't give a shit about who started this. I just want the cheapest rate. I want to save as much as I can. So that's the other side of this, which is that it's easy for us to be we should try and support, and we absolutely should. But market reality, sadly, is king at the end of the day. It's how much money do you make? Is the service better or cheaper?
And I will say, not to cut you off, this is where we have a chance to change the story. This is where our chamas are so important because they're saying the opposite of that. They're I'm actually going to give my money to someone I can see instead of just putting it on this app because I still value that. If we then forsake all this and say it doesn't matter, then we've lost. Let capitalism win, which, by the way, was imported from the West. You know what I'm saying? Let us go back to a little bit of our bartering system, our communities, checking on our people, because otherwise we have no chance against everything that's coming at us already.
Last thing I'll add to this is that I think Ethiopia is an incredible example of this at scale. You have a massive tech ecosystem, but it's quiet. It's all Ethiopian founders. It's all Ethiopian investors. And they actually really care about where's this from, who's built this. And there's a sense of pride in that. I think also Nigeria is a good market for that. All of their founders are local, or most of them are. So I think it's not every place. Some are built differently, but yeah, I think that there's just quite a few things to think about when we see photos like that.
And I don't want to be self-righteous because, like you said, not everyone can, and there's some realities. I just think if more of us who can do make those hard choices to go with a less fancy app, more expensive pants, we might start to see a return. In this conversation in 2040, when you're writing that headline, might be very different because we made the hard choices now that our ancestors actually made for us also to be in this room, quite frankly. So I think we can't lose our Africanness in all this. Honestly, this capitalism will kill us.
Anyways, yeah, I love this. No, that's good.
I just came from a reggae concert, so I'm like still on that vibe of Jah. Anyway, Bwana, I can come back to you again, but that's what networking is for afterwards. We had a question here about, and you touched on it. Do we want to give our young people this 1 foot in, 1 foot out so I can go to the next thing? You started answering it in quite a lovely way in your own experience.
Yeah. I think it's not that bad. To have like talent who are interested in joining a company but eventually doing their own thing. I think it's probably a good thing. Like, you don't want to, like, if someone is high potential, they're going to do amazing things. Do you actually want to keep them at your company for 10 years, or do you want them to do something great? Obviously, it's in your interest to do that. But like, I think for the ecosystem and for like development and growth, it is better that they go and do that thing. And so I think that it's not the worst thing. Where it becomes challenging or problematic where it becomes challenging firstly is that now you need to really think about incentive structures. Like, how do you get people to do that time to make sure that they get what they want? Like, within my company, we think a lot now about like, what does someone's like 18, 24 months here look like? How do they hit a great outcome at the end of that period? And then how are we ready to like either continue or like have someone else in if that's what they want to do? Because a lot of people at our company go and build others, or like they go and join others. So I think that's where that becomes important, and startups can do that with equity. Now, where it becomes problematic is where you have like, and we've seen this in the tech space, you have local startup A like hires talent, pays a pretty good rate, gives them equity. Microsoft lands in Kenya. Like, hey, that's a cool job. Why don't we offer you triple that to do the same thing with us? And that is actually super difficult for the local ecosystem. And it's a bit tricky because you actually want like a great Kenyan developer to get paid really well. That's awesome. But at the same time, it makes it very difficult for local companies to scale when all their talent is getting poached by Microsoft and AWS.
That's a huge Nairobi specific problem. Okay, so this question about AI, very, 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 very quickly, was kind of about losing our humanity. I've forgotten a little bit.
So many topics.
So many topics. 2 seconds.
It's all right. About the AI, it was how do we make sure that as much as we use AI, we don't turn into zombies?
Yes, that 93%.
And then
yes.
1 second to go.
Yeah.
How do we bridge the gap between global expectations as much as technological advancement is concerned with our local realities so that we excel in both ways? Thank you.
Do you use ChatGPT or any of those AI tools?
Neither.
You do?
I use this.
Use it, okay.
Everything I do is original for me.
You're in head. That's so impressive. Like today, that's rare. Do you use ChatGPT? Right?
I resist 50-50, but definitely prepping for this, it was helpful.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's why these questions are so damn hard. My personal experience is like I am like probably like twice as fast using tools like that. And smarter, like I'm more effective. So I don't know, I actually don't even, like I've seen things like this about it making you less effective. It's not about just using it for everything. People who do that don't do very well. But it's like when you have like a human problem and you can apply human thinking to it, but get like inputs from everywhere or like sources on what benchmarks are or how to think about a problem, it's really effective. So I don't know, I think the people who thrive at our company and generally at tech companies, like, what are the things that should be done by AI, which means like not done by other people or like their cognitive power? And then what tasks are actually best to think through and like problem solve and to add like the human element to. Like a lot of people problems you definitely can't solve with AI, but you can use AI to think about it or like get inputs and gather data and then make like human sort of decisions. So that's how I've seen it used at some of the better companies. Now on the other side, which is like localization, I think this is such a good question and such a big opportunity and what a lot of startups get wrong. You have companies that say, Netflix, great example. Hey, let's launch in Africa. Let's do the Africa thing. Let's like buy out a couple shows and like produce some originals, but they never localize their pricing model or like they rarely do. They don't really integrate payment rails. They don't have like a different pricing system until quite a few years down the line. And what they do is they lose market dominance to like, what's the other one? Is it Showmax? Showmax, which has like way more originals, but is also contextualized. You can actually buy, like if you just want to watch Premier League, you can buy a package which just gives you that on your mobile. Talk about localization. That's perfect. And so this is a point where like a lot of companies can win or lose based on how localized they are. But it is hard to communicate that to investors in the beginning. And it is like a sort of tension point. Like how do you show that localization piece without being influenced by folks from like the US or Europe who have funded you?
Really great question. I love your examples. Always so helpful. I got to shout out Kitfo TV in Ethiopia, which is trying to have their own. Have you heard about Kitfo?
Great name.
Online streaming, trying to compete with Netflix. Original Ethiopian entertainment content, still in the fundraising stages. I'm not a part of it, but if you want to know who they are, let me know. I'll put you in touch. Okay, thank you. You've been an incredible audience. Clap for yourselves. Amazing. So Caleb, thank you so much for being here, for sharing. Let me ask you one question before we close today, which I ask all my guests. What's bringing you joy?
What a great question. Today, right now, what's bringing me joy is actually just building the company, which is a bit lame, but like, it's really fun. It's been fun learning, growing the team, adding awesome team, and just like starting new projects and seeing where this thing can go. I think it's like early days, and it's cool to see a lot of it take shape. So yeah.
Well, if you can have joy with the work you're doing, I think you're in the right place. So that's a good sign, I think. And then lastly, we like to ask our people, what's a book, a bite, or a beat? So a book you're reading, a food you love, some vibes that are getting you through that you would recommend to people listening either here or elsewhere. Yeah, what's your recommendation?
Man, okay. So I think of a book firstly. A book. So I'm reading and rereading this book called Alchemy by this guy, Rory Sutherland, who was like at Ogilvy, this marketing agency. And it's a really interesting perspective on how to break down and solve problems, not from like a fundamentals mindset, but from a marketing mindset. And it's interesting how many things you can solve from good marketing.
It's called Alchemy, and it's about marketing.
Yeah, I'll lend it to you. Yeah.
Please
with my notes.
Give me the highlights, yes. No, thank you so much for being here. This has just elevated the stories we've been able to tell, to hear your perspectives. And Tech Safari, just, blessing upon blessing. May your reach and your influence only continue to grow. You're doing amazing work. Yeah.
It's been such a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And thank you, listeners, for tuning in. Thank you to our Nairobi audience for tuning in, our live audience. We had to re-record this ending because, your friend here forgot. But thank you for tuning in. We can't do it without you. We missed being back on the air, but we're so happy to be back. Like, share, subscribe. You know what to do. And we'll catch you on the next episode where we're going to continue the series, Saying the African Part Out Loud. Don't miss it. We'll see you next time.
I know it's hard, but baby, you just got to.
Thank you, everybody, for letting us do it.
I know it's hard, but baby, you just got to. Hold on.